So disingenuous Republican snowflakes just couldn't stand the fact that children were able to mobilize a nationwide protest where more than 1 million people demanded moderate gun reform. Now again, let me remind you that they just survived the Parkland mass shooting. But yet, these Republicans don't think that they have a legitimate reason to call for gun reform, and they also are opposed to them. So what did they do in order to basically denounce what these students did? Well, they attacked them, and they made fun of them in a pretty ruthless way, even by Republican standards. So the first individual that decided to attack them was Congressman Steve King, who posted this to Facebook about Emma Gonzalez, saying, "This is how you look when you claim Cuban heritage yet don't speak Spanish and ignore the fact that your ancestors fled the island when the dictatorship turned Cuba into a prison camp after removing all weapons from its citizens, hence their right to self-defense." See, these are the types of ad hominem character attacks that you have to resort to if you don't have a legitimate response to someone's argument. But the fact that this was a sitting congressman who attacked a child makes this particularly egregious. So it's not just that his argument is laughable, it's that he's directing this argument, this criticism, this ruthless criticism towards a teenager. What is wrong with you? You can be against gun reform. That's fine. We know you're against gun reform, Steve King, because you're corrupt and you take money from the NRA. But to attack a child, what is wrong with you? I don't know how else to describe this as anything other than bullying. Now, right-wing radio host Bill Mitchell took to Twitter to state how David Hogg, one of the organizers and survivors, looks like one of the kids from Children of the Corn. Real classy. You're attacking a child who just survived a mass shooting. And now, since his world was turned upside down, he's probably still shell-shocked from the event that he saw. You're choosing to say he looks like someone from Children of the Corn. Go fuck yourself, Bill Mitchell. How disgusting do you have to be to attack a child? Now, Meghan McCain also spoke out. Now, she didn't resort to ad hominem attacks, but she certainly was offended by the tone and language used by David Hogg.
There were a lot of comments coming out specifically from David Hogg that I don't...
Who's he?
He's one of the big kids, yeah. But one thing I will say is that you don't move the narrative when you use language like this. And he said, it just makes me think what sick blankers out there want to continue to sell more guns, murder more children, and honestly just get reelected. What type of blanking person does that? They could have blood from children splattered all over their faces and they don't take action because all they see is dollar signs. There's another kid, Kyle Kashuv, I believe his name is, who is the Second Amendment pro supporter that's also Parkland student who's been meeting with so many politicians, including Vice President Pence twice, the President of the United States, and congressmen and senators across the country. And I just think, I wish we could have it where the rhetoric isn't that any of us could have blood splattered on our faces and your life perspective wouldn't be changed. And I don't think it's productive.
See, I watched that video and I think it's just so funny that Republicans call the left triggered snowflakes. How can you maintain that position if your side continues to cry every time they hear naughty words? She said here, you don't move the narrative when you use language like this, and she also stated that his type of rhetoric wasn't productive. So the problem is that rather than addressing the actual message that David Hogg was saying, which was legitimate, she was too triggered by his naughty words more than anything and just couldn't get past it. Well, let me tell you this, Megan. If you're more offended by David Hogg using naughty words than you are with lawmakers' inaction, then there's something fundamentally wrong with you. Your priorities are ass backwards and you need to get them in order because naughty words, that's less important than lawmakers not doing anything. But Jesse Waters of Fox News also seemed to be a bit offended by the language used by David Hogg during this event.
The guy, is it David Hogg or Hoggs? He started off, and I've seen him on Fox News, he started off as this balanced, nice kid who was reporting the facts about what were happening at the school, and he's just now become a real bomb thrower. And someone like this, I think, isn't helping the conversation. It makes people get their backs up. This guy makes people think, you're coming for my guns. You're going to say that Rubio has blood on his hands because he takes money from the NRA. Maybe he takes money from the NRA because he supports the Second Amendment.
Or maybe it's the case that he takes money from the NRA because he's corrupt and he cares more about his own re-election prospects than the lives of children. So, I'm sorry, but if he continues to behave in this way, we will continue to say that he has blood on his hands, because being complicit when you can do something, when you have the power to act, that means, yes, you have blood on your hands. If you think that that's a little bit too far or harsh, too bad. My favorite part here was when he said, this guy makes people think that they're coming for my guns, but that's not what they're saying they want. They're calling for moderate gun reform. So by saying that you think they want to take away your guns, you're misrepresenting their argument and you're being intellectually dishonest. But Jesse Waters wasn't the only smug asshole at Fox News that decided to attack children, because so-called comedian Greg Gutfeld decided to get in on this as well.
So what was once personal is now political, complete with slogans, signs, a gushing media, militant salutes, and of course, invective.
First off, I'm going to start off by putting this price tag right here as a reminder for you guys to know how much Marco Rubio took for every student's life in Florida. $1.05.
So that was harsh. But was it daring? Not really. What would be daring is including a Parkland student with a different viewpoint on gun control up on that stage as well. Now, with David Hogg, he's just a kid, right? So the media says off limits. But the Rubio thing, that was lame grandstanding. Is that too harsh to Mr. Hogg? Not really, because by criticizing him, I'm complimenting him. He's now revolutionary, like other well-organized and well-funded revolutionaries. Not challenging revolutionaries would be patronizing.
So that's how a grown adult justifies his attack on a teenager. He claims that he is a, quote, well-funded revolutionary. Now, what is he trying to imply by saying that David Hogg is a well-funded revolutionary? He's trying to suggest here, like Republicans do all the time, that that teenager can't possibly care this much about gun violence. He couldn't have possibly developed this position on guns because of his experience almost getting killed by them, or on his own accord at all. It's because he's being bankrolled by George Soros. Forget about the actual funding from the NRA politicians receive that literally buys their inaction. It's these children who are the ones who are well-funded, who are demanding moderate gun reform. They're the ones who are really corrupt, not these politicians. Way to speak truth to power, Greg. And this is someone who considers himself to be a comedian. Well, the reason why nobody even knows that you're a comedian and nobody thinks you're funny, Greg, is because if you are punching down, you're not being funny. You're just being an asshole. You're being a bully. And that's what you were doing to this child, David Hogg. And perhaps the most condescending and contradictory attack I saw came from right-wing Barbie herself, Tomi Lahren, who put these children in their place by telling them how wrong they were by misrepresenting their argument.
You say this was a march for our lives, but the message was more anti-gun and anti-NRA than anything else. This demonization of the NRA does nothing to solve the problem. Do you realize the NRA is made of nearly 5 million of your fellow Americans? These are people who want what's best for this country, just like you do. You may think the solution is gun control, and we can debate that. But don't you dare blame law-abiding gun owners and NRA members for crimes they didn't commit. You don't get to self-righteously demonize those who disagree with your gun control agenda.
Okay, think about how ridiculous her argument is. She said, this demonization of the NRA does nothing to solve the problem. Are you kidding me? The NRA is at the center of the problem because they are the one main obstacle that's preventing reform. If they weren't buying politicians and corrupting the political process, maybe it'd be the case that we'd have moderate gun reform, since the overwhelming majority of the American people want moderate gun reform. So to suggest that demonizing the NRA is a misguided way to approach the situation, it doesn't even make sense. Now, she also said you may think the solution is gun control, and we can debate that, but you don't dare blame law-abiding gun owners and NRA members for crimes they didn't commit. They were literally marching for gun control. They weren't marching against gun owners. They weren't marching against NRA members. They were marching because they wanted gun reform. At what point did they say that people who own guns, who are law-abiding citizens, are evil people? That's not what they're saying. They're trying to prevent people who are crazy and criminals from obtaining weapons. Don't you guys support that as well? Apparently not, because now you're attacking them for stating this position. But I saved the best for last, because Rick Santorum basically attacked these kids in the most idiotic way imaginable. I mean, what he said almost made my head explode. So if you haven't already seen this by now, take a look.
This is a political movement, and it very well may be, and that's fine. I mean, if the organizers, the people who certainly supported it, the Hollywood elites and the liberal billionaires who funded this, it's all about politics. Is this really all about politics, or is it all about keeping our schools safe? Because it is about keeping our schools safe. Then we have to have much broader discussion than the discussion that's going on right now. How about kids, instead of looking to someone else to solve their problem, do something about maybe taking CPR classes or trying to deal with situations that where there is a violent shooter that you
how
can
are they
actually
looking at other
respond to
people?
that.
I would ask you, they took action.
Yeah, they took action to ask someone to pass a law. They didn't take action to say, how do I, as an individual, deal with this problem? How am I going to do something about stopping bullying within my own community? What am I going to do to actually help respond to a shooter? What am I going to do? Those are the kinds of things where you can take it internally and say, here's how I'm going to deal with this. Here's how I'm going to help the situation, instead of going and protesting and saying, oh, someone else needs to pass a law to protect me.
Wow. How do you respond to that? That's someone who is so unreasonable, so far removed from reality, that I don't think a response to what he's saying, it wouldn't have an impact. I mean, what do you say to that? He said, instead of kids looking to someone else to solve their problems, do something about maybe taking CPR classes or try to deal with situations where there is a violent shooter. So what he's suggesting is that instead of trying to prevent these shootings from occurring in the first place, these students should instead equip themselves with the knowledge needed to better respond to mass shootings.
You are so dumb. You are really dumb. For real.
You're seriously suggesting with a straight face that they should try to take matters into their own hands? And they should try to better respond to shooters? I mean, should we arm them, Rick? What's the solution? Now, he claims that they didn't take meaningful action because they're asking someone else to come to the rescue. They're asking lawmakers to pass a law protecting them, so they're not doing something for themselves. But that's how things work in a democracy. If something is happening, you pressure government to take action. What are you even talking about? This is a former presidential candidate, a former senator, and he's saying that by putting pressure on lawmakers, these kids aren't really doing anything. What is wrong with you, Rick Santorum? Why does CNN have him on their payroll? He's a contributor to CNN. They bring him back again and again and treat him like he has legitimate policy positions and actual political commentary that makes sense when he just said one of the dumbest things I think I've ever heard in my entire life. These children are not able to pass laws themselves. They're directing their activism towards their country's government. That's what you do when you want policy changes. So, I mean, congrats to all of these Republican pundits and politicians who decided to attack these children, some of which, again, were as young as 9. I mean, do you feel big about yourself being able to trigger young libs like this? Do you feel like a badass because you are talking down condescendingly to 9-year-olds? Really? I mean, does that make you feel big? I don't know what to say, but this is really low, even for Republicans. Shame on you. Shame on every single Republican that spoke out against these children.
Support this podcast by becoming a patron at patreon.com/Humanist Report.